And I don't think it's just important when it comes to Africa, but
It
our
applies to
region,
everybody.
Central and
Correct.
Eastern Europe,
Yes.
for example, is also a region that hasn't been able to tell its own story for many decades under communism. And obviously it's only the recent few decades where countries like Poland or Estonia have been able to tell the world what they really stand for. So it all goes back to how many years we've got under our belt that we have been able to do nation branding effectively. We've spoken about challenges, but what about opportunities? I think one, Tebe, you just mentioned, it's the cost of debt, right? If you have a stronger nation brand, you can have cheaper debt. It's like with regular corporate brands. If you have a stronger corporate brand, you're able to borrow money at a cheaper rate than a brand that has only been set up.
And you can charge premium for
and you can charge premium for your goods and services.
Because now, if you look at from an African perspective, for example, everything that we have is out at a discount. Ali Mazrui, who's a great academic from Harvard, Kenyan, Tanzanian, he said Africa produces what it doesn't consume and consumes what it doesn't produce. And that's why, for example, if you look at the recent debate between De Beers and Botswana, when De Beers came back to Botswana and said, we want to still sell your diamonds on the same terms we have for the last 50 years. And President then Masisi said, no, the times have changed. We own the diamonds, we set the terms. And De Beers said, well, then we'll take our customers. And Botswana says, we'll create new customers. So you can see that growth in strength, right? Because now the country's understanding that when you are confident in your brand, when you've built the strength of your brand, you are able to determine the terms of engagement. And that's why I think your countries have been able to do, because Switzerland determines the terms of engagement with the world. And that's why you're among the highest incomes, the most desired places to come to. And I think that's what you're also learning now. You're also learning that how can we build a stronger Polish brand? How can we, because that enables you to define the terms of engagement. And that's what is happening in the African perspective right now as well, is we are redefining the terms of engagement. We now want to get premium for made in Africa rather than sell at discount. And part of doing that is beneficiation. It's about owning your resources. It's about determining the cost of doing business and blah, blah, blah with Africa.
Fantastic. I mean, there are many countries that are doing nation branding, as you said, in the Middle East, for example, but there are still many countries that don't really know how to go about it or don't see the reason for it, or they engage in nation marketing, but in very fragmented ways, without a core message, without changing the narrative. They just want to, promote all the good stuff that they have, and that's great. But there's more to it. And do you have any examples from your field where you can demonstrate to those countries, well, listen, this is worth doing. Nation branding pays off. It can reimagine your country's growth.
That's a good question. Well, talking about opportunities and also investing in brand and how you can really then leverage that, I think Estonia has taken the approach to unify the message that we want to give. So they have established a toolbox for all Estonians and also to all our people to use the same messaging, unify the message. And sometimes I think the simplicity is very important, to have clear messages that are simple, also digestible for own people but abroad. And that message has been very clear as well, that we would like to be still leaders in digital world and offer e-government access to all people, that they can then have easier access to also to build up their own government. So for example, we collaborate a lot with other governments who come to Estonia. They can skip the mistakes. They can also take the whole Estonian package with them. And Estonia is very open to collaborate. And through that we are ready first to give away that knowledge. I think that you want to contribute to something, it creates other opportunities to collaborate. So for example, for research and the educational level, on the academy level, there is a lot of collaboration happening. And Estonia is very willing to welcome those people then to Estonia, to invest in Estonia. So foreign trade investment comes also sometimes through that trust that is created. opportunities maybe in that sense that when your brand is getting stronger, and Estonia has invested, we don't have really, like you mentioned, those millions that many other countries have, and we have 1.3 million, so our GDP is really much, it's 1/3 of Swiss GDP per capita. But I think the limited resources makes us also willing to be very ambitious about it. So what we have and the people that we have, we put them in the front line, work together with private and public sector. And that is amazing in Estonia. The public and private sector are very closely working together, and that is the beauty of being a small country. So you can put really the Skype, the Wise, the Bolt, who are unicorns. So Estonia has the most unicorns per capita in the Europe, and we are very proud of that as well. And they kind of bring these powerhouses together to then use that also for the national branding to create new opportunities. But I suppose it's also, Estonia is not always seeing the problem. They kind of ask themselves the question, what are our options? And then you just choose the best option and try to innovate from there.
Alexander, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so maybe, first of all, for us, nation branding is first a political decision. We're running, so I run the community, so the soft power agency of Switzerland, but the definition of what do we stand for is a political matter. The narrative is firstly political. Nation branding is only one part of the process. It's part of the toolbox, but it has to be defined politically. The reality of Switzerland, a European-based liberal country, it's not me defining or deciding what the story I tell. My job is to make it into a story, but the real story has to mirror the reality of the country and the political decisions. And this is what we try to do with Switzerland. This is why I have to tell you that the fact that so many people place the money in Swiss banks, it's because the brand is good, so they trust us. And then it's a job from the government to guarantee a better compliance, what has happened in the last 20 years. And we've been, compared to many other financial centers, we've been less bad than the others. I don't think we can claim or pretend that everything has been perfect, but compared to many other competitors, we give much more money back to the countries where it's a long process. It's unfair for people waiting for it, but nonetheless, I think the trust on what Switzerland in that matter is better now than 20 years ago. It's not there where it should be yet, but it's a long run, and we're working on it. And then for the challenges we're facing, I think one is innovation. We are indeed very high in an innovation ranking based on the patents and so on, but the perception of Switzerland is not as good in that field. It doesn't mean that we're very low, and their perception matters. If you're an investor, you have 2 hours when you attend a tech conference, you have to allocate your time. And perception is key in the time allocation from anyone, but also from investors. And we don't have yet that effect of it's Swiss, must be good. There, most probably, if you have Estonian, it increases the curiosity. Say, I know Estonia is very innovative, so we're going to look at the Estonian startup, the highest number of unicorn per capita. This is not the case. So the fact from Switzerland, we're also good, but we're working on that perception in order to say, okay, if I'm an investor from Joburg, I can meet 5 startups. One of them should be Swiss because I know Swiss are good. We're not there yet. We have that in the field of pharma, research, and so on. The best university in Europe is Zurich. I think Warsaw is number 2. I guess the number 1 is ETH Zurich in the field of AI and competition. I have to place 2 or 3 sentences on each panels about the assets of Switzerland. But jokes aside, I think startups like innovation, like what we discussed earlier, one of the big challenges we have is if you are 60 years old anywhere in the world, you do know Switzerland, or you might have a positive image of Switzerland. If you're 20 years old now, for the exact reasons people of 60 years old and plus are liking Switzerland, it might be a downside for the 20 years old now. So I think one of the challenges is how do we keep being relevant to emerging leaders, to younger people worldwide. And so in the Global South, indeed, our image, whatever Global South means, I think, but we haven't found anything better than Global South yet. It could be the others, but I think would be not good. But that challenge, it's very difficult to define it from a branding perspective because it's a complex reality. It's not that India, South Africa, and Brazil are part of the same thing, but nonetheless, the emerging leaders, let's say, so whatever, global south, we don't have yet the image there. It's not as bad as many colonial countries, as a matter of fact, but we're not there where it should be. So it's also one of the challenge in the north as well as in the south. How do we keep the discussion with emerging ones? And then it takes all the values. It takes co-creation, it takes open mind and so on. So the recipes we had are no longer working with these target audience from a very marketing perspective. It doesn't mean we have to lie and to wear a mask. It just that we have to reinvent ourselves to keep the same values, but adapt them and to be heard and to engage with this audience. And I think it's a fascinating moment where nation branding can contribute. Also, it's a political decision what is nation branding, but nation branding can change a bit the political understanding, because the discussion you need to have in defining what do we stand for allows, sometimes it's easier than a full political process. The discussion is say, what's our story, has political consequences, and then the arbitrage has to be made by the politicians. But nonetheless, the process in the making from branding process, it's a absolutely fascinating moment to define that.
I want to build on that because I agree. One of the other challenges that we have or recognize is that nation branding is not just about the promotion, about the campaigns. Because I think the mistake that many countries make is they think that a campaign will change the essence of a country. Because a campaign is just like peeing yourself, just feels nice for 2 seconds. Thereafter, you start smelling. So definitely that's not what it is, right? I also want to build on a second thing is the political one. I don't want to call it political. I want to call it policy. Yeah. So because you say politics, because the politicians come and go. The policies, you need to have sustainable policies, because you can come up with a great idea of what your country stands for or what your country should be in 30 years, as you've done. But if you rely on the politics or the politicians, they'll come and they'll change that. So you want sustainable policies that will ensure that those ideas go beyond generations and go beyond politicians. Then there's probably a third and important P, which we all tend to forget, the people. Because I think when it comes to nation branding, the people are important. It's important that the people understand who we are, what we stand for, and that they believe. And that's a trust that you talked about earlier. Because we can say all we want. If the people don't believe and they don't trust in the politics or the politicians or the policies or even the promotion of the campaign, then your nation brand is going to fall flat. So I think it's important that we do not forget the most important part of any nation branding. Take the people with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it can't be something removed from what people feel they should be standing for. So it's always important to engage all the stakeholders. I think we can now open it to the audience, and David has been wanting to ask a question. I'll pass on the mic so that people online can hear you as well.
Well, it's a very simple question flowing from what you talked about, so I'll keep it short. Yes, more money is being spent on nation branding, there's no doubt. But in the scale of the world economy, it's still a relatively small number, even if you add it all up together. And what I want to pick up on is the misinformation and disinformation. It's quite clear that apart from very big countries which are investing in state-sponsored media, either by setting up their own media or by investing in other media, that they get the lion's share of the shout. And the question is, how can that structurally ever change in favor of smaller countries? Should there be a kind of United Nations information service? Should there be a Pan-African information service? How do you get over that problem?
It's a challenge, first of all, of policy. Defining what it should be is already, also in that case, political. When you look at the UN, take the UN Security Council, take P5, so the 5 permanent members. They disagree.
Nobody trusts them, but that's a different subject.
I won't comment on that online. No, but the fact is they disagree almost on every standard at the moment. And I'm not doing UN bashing because it's easy to criticize UN. What would it be if even UN was not there? So in that sense, it's easy to see some of the issues UN is facing, but if we didn't have it as well. But then agreeing on what does it mean to have a quality information, very difficult. And you have actually at the UN level, you have IUT, you have different gremium already talking about information, defining standards. You have the ICANN for the internet. Neutrality of internet is key. I mean, that's a massive issue, but nobody really agrees on the regulation. What does it mean? So defining the standards, this is part of political. We all think that we are facing challenges, but again, from Russia Today to Washington Post, look at the US. What happened in the US during the election? Again, not commending it, but the fact is you have billionaires owning media outlets. How do you like them? I mean, it's not philanthropy. So how can you expect one billionaire owning a newspaper to agree? I mean, you have to be very strong and very good human beings by financing a media outlet criticizing you. So in that sense, it's not even the question of media, it's a question of democracy. In the US, they dismantled AT&T 60 years ago because they think they were too big. It was a danger for the US, and based on the anti-cartel law in the US, they could dismantle AT&T. Politically, it's not only in the US, it shows that the US had a very strong anti-cartel thing because they think the balance between public and private is relevant. It was not communism. So it was right after McCarthyism that they decided to dismantle AT&T. So in that sense, that political discussion, how can we balance things? The media is one thing, but on a more global scale, it's a challenge we're facing. And I don't think anyone is going to be elected on that topic. That might be kind of an issue, but this is a key element.
And it's probably harder now because now, in the past, you could control a narrative, but now everybody's in charge of the narrative. So because I've got a phone, I've got internet, I've got a computer, I've got a little audience, and now there's micro segments, if you will, of people who are controlling the narrative. So that's why the key, I think you use the word trust. That's why the key is about building trust and being clear from a political, if you will, perspective, and enabling the last Pia talked about people, because if people believe, if your people believe in you, they then become the defenders of your story. They then become the propagators of your story. They tell the story, and you don't need, quote unquote, an agency to tell the story. Because the role of the agency, whether it's government, whether it's President Swiss or all those, the role of them is to put concepts out now and let the public take it forward. Because we pass those days where we can tell them what to think. They're telling us what to think now. And we're seeing them every day on the internet. We're seeing them on X. We're seeing them on Instagram, on TikTok. Why do you think America wants to ban TikTok? Not because TikTok is really... Not because they're not trying to ban TikTok because TikTok is trying to steal information. No, because they're realizing that these kids who are on TikTok are very powerful. They are communicating and creating perceptions and narratives about the world and about America. And that's what they're afraid of. So that is much tougher now, David. It's much harder now. And I'm not sure we're living in the times now where agencies are going to work in terms of a UN and all those things. The only agency that works now is called people.
And smart nation branding would take that into account, as you said, not to challenge the opinions online by telling people what to think, but to engaging with them and co-creating with them, understanding what they mean and how they see their own story, inspiring them to
lead by example. Don't tell people what to think because it doesn't work. Again, the whole elite from the East and West Coast have been telling the US citizens that Trump was the wrong one. It was massive. All the newspaper, all the media outlet on both coasts. I'm not commenting politically, but they've been telling them not to vote for Trump. Didn't work that well. So telling people you're wrong is certainly not what is expected by the people, whatever people is, and it doesn't work anymore. You should rather say, instead of saying it doesn't go, you should show you have a positive, as in leading by positive example is more inspiring than telling people negative and that they're wrong.
Absolutely. Miriam, you wanted to come back as well.
Yes, I'm building on what both co-panelists said. I think it's also important not to forget that 20 years ago, yes, we didn't have social media. Now everyone can actually put out their own message, whether it's politician. And it's also like comparing the realities that everyone has, right? So we have a information overflow, but it's very big key. What I feel is to having the freedom of internet. Estonia is ranking number 1 or 2 always in the internet freedom. that those people also have the possibility to actually express their opinion, that they can use the tools what they want to use. And the second is also press. Estonia is number 6 in press freedom. And I think when we put all those factors together, then it comes also again that we have to collaborate as a countries more together, to talk to each other. And that, whether now it's the Lake NATO, where Estonia has the new Nordic Baltic countries, and we work now much closer together, that sometimes it needs also a push that countries again work together, and that needs definitely more regulation as well. That what we understand is similar to the cyber world, that we need more regulations and laws to regulate that. And I suppose in some stage we need also more regulation on that side, what it comes to misinformation and how can we handle that. And more technology maybe to detect that. Estonia is working on that as well, to detect what is actually real and what is not real. Yeah.
And education, so it's also key. And not educate top down, but the fact when you see, it's easy to save money. When you have budget cuts, education is a no-brainer. It's easy because you don't see the consequences directly. But on the long run, this is where you see consequences. It also covers access to universities when you have to cut a leg, cut an arm to pay your taxes. So, I mean, free access to private, not privately owned, but public education is key. Giving the people the tools to make up their mind. So it's not you telling every time, is it a right, is it a fake one? But giving, so education, again, if you have kids and you give them the tools for them to develop their own understanding, we shouldn't save money on education.
And critical thinking.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're not just talking about nation branding, we're fixing the world here. We've run slightly over time, but I hope we can, because we started a bit late. Gina, you had a question.
Just so that we have a balanced perspective, we've had great examples with Switzerland and Estonia. Tebe, can you give us a country on the continent of Africa that's got their branding, that's doing nation branding really, really well? Just so that we have a balance here.
Balance of countries. Well, I mean, thank you, Gina, for the question. So if you look at in the continent, there are a couple of countries which actually understand this well. You look at a country like Rwanda. 30 years ago, 1994, 1 million people killed in 3 months based on their tribal identity. 30 years later, I remember walking into Rwanda and asking the one person, not 30 years later, some time back, and I said to him, "Are you Hutu or Tutsi?" And he says, "I'm neither. I'm Rwandan." And that was the beginning. To me, it was an important moment, because it said, here's a people who understand that they are first a people of one country. But what Rwanda has also done very well is it's not just been the rhetoric of talking about being one, being a people. But if you look at what they've done, they've now positioned themselves as the center of consequential African decisions. So if you look at decisions about the one passport for Africa, about the Africa Free Trade Continental Area Agreement, all were decided in Rwanda. Rwanda is smaller than South Africa by far. 12 million versus 60 million, something like that. But Rwanda is probably going to get Formula One before South Africa. And South Africa has got a Formula One track. The last Formula One was held in South Africa. South Africa's got more money, has got more hotels and better hotels, has got more Formula One fans. But because of the power of a visionary power of Rwanda, of the leadership of Rwanda probably get it before because of the brand Rwanda. There's a trust factor in the brand Rwanda that if you put it in that country, it will work, and that's the power of nation branding, if you will. If you are able to transform a country and to have people believe, people look at Rwanda and they say, how could you have 98% people vote for a president? And when I ask the question, for example, to one or two people, they say peaceful, clean, visionary, works. It should have been 100%. 2% was just for the Instagram. But you know what I mean. But so that to me, there's a power of a country doing its work well. But I was in Ethiopia last week as well. Ethiopia is interesting. Now, Ethiopia, I don't know how many of you have been to Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is 20 million people. For a long time, Ethiopia was closed. Then they have Premier Abiy became the premier two terms ago, within his first 3 years as interim president, transformed the city of Addis Ababa. If you go there now, you go look what is done to just the one city. Because sometimes what you need, you don't have to transform the whole country. You just have to transform one place to set the example. It becomes a benchmark of what we can do. That city probably looks better than Johannesburg now. And when I looked at, he pretty much didn't ask people what they need to do. He led people to where they need to go. Wiped out all the torn building, moved all the people who were not in proper houses, put them in proper houses, destroyed all the buildings, rebuilt the entire city center, all in 7 years. And I think that's a power of leadership. Is it Akio Morito from Sony, who when they asked him if the Walkman is going to, have you done your research on the Walkman? He says, do not ask customers what they want. Show them what they need. So I think the power of Rwanda and the power of Ethiopia shows that part of what you also need, you need a bit of benevolent dictatorship. So you need somebody who leads with a strong hand but a soft heart. And I think that's what you're beginning to see in the continent as well, that you have some of those countries. The countries, like my country, South Africa, which is probably the most democratic country in perhaps the whole continent, I think we must be number one in internet freedom or press freedom. Because we can say what we want, where we want, how we want it. Nobody's going to arrest me. Nobody is going to charge me in that country. I think that's something beautiful as well. So every country, when you go to it, you can realize that there are pockets of excellence in the continent. What we need to do is we need to put them all together to create a great continent.
Thanks for those examples. Yes, a question there.
I'm wondering how you think that countries can punch above their weight and gain more brand equity, regardless of the budget that they have at their disposal.
Well, I mean, Rwanda is a good example. So if you're watching Premiership EPL every Sunday, and you see when Arsenal plays well, or when they play, is it play well or play? When they play well, they're doing all right, they're number 2, right? Every time Arsenal plays, or anybody plays against Arsenal, you see visit Rwanda. That's punching above your weight. It's such a small country in the rest, relative to the rest of the continent, but yet they understand that part of building the brand is to find those niche areas, those unique places where you can place your brand. If nothing else, not because Visit Rwanda is going to make Rwanda great, but by putting Visit Rwanda, you create a curiosity about the country. And then when you create the curiosity, you must also come and deliver. Rwanda delivers on their promise. When you go to. So I think that's the power of punching above your weight. Because and Switzerland is a good example of size does not always matter. Because it's a small country, this. It's a little corner compared to the rest of the continent. But what it's been able to do for itself, to position itself as this trusted place in the middle of nowhere, was it middle of Europe, with 40 mountains.
Somewhere Davos is in the middle of
with
nowhere.
40 mountains, 4,000 meters and high. It's the power of and then we in Davos. Nobody's ever heard of this place until they put a little meeting here 50 years ago. And now look at all of us, we are here. It's the power of punching above your weight. That even a little place like this or a small country like this can, or Rwanda or any other, Botswana. Botswana is a country of 1.5 or 1.8 million people in South Africa. They're punching above their weight. They're telling big behemoths like the bears and the rest of the world to go take a hike. They moved all the resources out of London. They said, why should we move our diamonds to London to be cleaned up and done and polished in London? They should be done here in Gaborone. And they moved that to Gaborone many years ago, and that strengthened their hand in how they can run their brand. So it is not the size of the country that matters. I think it's the size of the vision and the leadership that matters.
It's the confidence, the boldness of it. And obviously it all starts with brand recognition, with building that familiarity, with mental availability, especially when you're a small country. You do need to make yourself known through those initiatives. I mean, without that, it's going to be very difficult. Well, Estonian Skype is obviously a great example, and that sort of digital
If I might Peru as a good example, without buying advertisement at Arsenal, it goes with a budget question. I mean, Peru was fascinating, and the image of Peru has changed thanks to restaurants all over the world. When you think about it, 15 or 20 years ago, the image of Peru, with all my respect to the country, was not a trendy place to be in. Now in London, people are queuing to eat fish cooked Peruvian way. So, I mean, this is something, it's great, it's stupid, it's restaurants, but all over the world, in the biggest cities in the world, you have that Peruvian restaurants, and it opened a door to say, oh, maybe there are real people living there, not only playing flute in the enda. No, it's kind of, we're really talking about perception. They made a complete change, and I think Peru is much more desirable today, from a perspective, a perception perspective, than 20 years ago. And it takes supporting restaurants all over the world. It doesn't take millions of it. I think Arsenal is not doing that well at the moment. But it's not only money; it's also finding your niche and finding what the others are not doing. And Peru really achieved something great.
Yeah.
It was grassroots, bottom up. At the beginning, it was Peruvian people just opening restaurants, but the government has been clever and flexible enough to see that there was a potential, and they've been supporting it. So it doesn't have to be top down. It's also sometimes that you have to look at the talents you have in your country, what works, and then supporting what is existing. It's not only a minister deciding from now on we're going to open restaurants. This is not how it worked. And I think that seeing the assets in the country, supporting them is also a good way.
Thailand did the exact same thing. Most of the Thai restaurants in the world were actually set up with the help of the Thai government, and they spend millions of dollars on that campaign. It's not just tourism. It's not just that it's good food. It's also that there was a vision behind it, and action behind it, and money behind it to make it work.
And to create the experience, right? I think it's also sometimes when the people walk away with experience, and you have nowadays the opportunity to create this curiosity about the country, or like you mentioned, to find that niche. What could it be? Because Estonia also, it has only, half of the country is covered by forest. It has apparently the cleanest air, at least.
We believe you.
Exactly.
You've got all the stats.
Exactly. But in a way, we have also people who come there because there is no light pollution to see the stars. And we come to the point where really the nature becomes again relevant. And then you find this niche, and then we talk about the food and everything, and that experience can be phenomenal. And Nordic lights and everything that we have. And then once that is there, and you have these Estonians who are excited about their own country, me being one, of course, you can see the national colors always with me, but also like then having those Estonians who get the others excited and make them ambassadors. And then it's enough that one of these ambassadors who walk around, they are so excited about the Estonian, they make a story, there is an influencer, and so the brand grows. And I think this is so good nowadays also to use the digital world to make that branding if you have a limited budget, right? So I think that is very good question, how also we can challenge and make ourselves creative
So
about
bring
it.
your country, bring your nation brand closer to people all around the world through restaurants, through ambassadors, through people
E-residence.
as ambassadors, e-residency, through the internet, and so on.
And it's the thing that you talked about, which I think one of your strongest initiatives at Brand Finance has been the soft power index. It's because see the things you talk about, the restaurants, the fashion, the arts, the culture, that's soft power. When people are beginning to say, oh my God, I should go to this place because of that. But it doesn't happen on its own. Like you made the example with Thailand. Somebody needs to see, and somebody needs to invest in, somebody needs to encourage. And I think that's countries like that, that's what they're doing. And I think that's why it's so important to have to measure. They say what gets measured gets done. So by having a soft power index or all those, perhaps it's probably one of the most beautiful things. I mean, soft power has been around forever. But we've done it now, creating an index. Now everybody can say, what is it that drives my soft power? And how can I leverage that? So that's where you now need listening governments and listening leadership, and not just leaders who just want to be leaders, because the problem with politicians, they just want the position and they don't take positions.
Well, thanks so much for that. Sales always work better when someone else endorses you. So I don't have to be doing the pitch. We've got Tebe here. But definitely measurement of nation brand perceptions is key, because without that you don't understand where you stand, you don't understand what your people think about you, what other people think about you, how you measure up against others, and you don't understand how you can progress from wherever you are if you don't know where you are. So that's obviously very, very important. We could go on forever, but I think we're sort of 15 minutes past, and we should probably... Two, 3 more minutes. So we've got time for just one question.
This is what we call
Dan
African
in the
time.
front.
We're in Switzerland. They are very precise.
Actually, this is not Swiss, I have to say, sorry. I don't want to blame anyone. But the trains are still coming right on time. What's happening within the country's pavilions
It's a different thing.
It's not our responsibility.
Well, yeah, to maybe finish on a bit of a light note. In the beginning, Alexander mentioned, U.S. kind of being one of the first countries to really take this perspective of creating a nation brand, and one of the biggest things they've done it through is film, is showing people around the world what U.S. is like, and a lot of people from all over the world starting to dream, I wish one day I'll live in LA, or I wish one day I'll live in New York, because they've seen their favorite gangster on screen live in New York, or their favorite character on screen be somewhere in the middle of the United States. And so, with saying all of that, my question is today, how much are you considering entertainment when developing your strategies to brand your country or your continent? How much of an importance are you placing on entertainment and these kind of art forms, going from film to music to social media, probably? Because essentially, in my subjective view, of course, place and branding is in a big part storytelling. So that would be my question.
I just want to say, in a quick example, a young lady called Tyler, South African, Mapiano, the most downloads, more than Beyonce last year, 1.6 billion. Now, if you beat Beyonce on downloads, you know you are beating a behemoth. So the problem or the opportunity for the continent is to realize a couple of things. One is everybody's dancing Amapiano. You go to Dubai, you go to London, you go to China, they are dancing Amapiano. Then as a continent, country, South Africa, which is where it comes from, what South Africa we should be doing, we should be recognizing that moment and saying, how do we help to use this as a vehicle? Because you can't do much. Because remember, when it comes to creativity, you can't actually do anything. All you can do is to create an enabling environment. And when you see something happening, is not to jump on it, but to build on it and to say, this really begins to tell the story of who we are. But it starts by first understanding who are we, because creativity may not be who you are. And so you may not want to bounce into something that is not about who you are. So I think entertainment, fashion, art, sports, so the creative and cultural sector is quite important. And if you look at, they say estimates are the $3 trillion economy, the creative economy. And from an African perspective, we only account for 3% of that. And we are 16 or so, 15% of the world, and we account for 3%. Will be 50% of the world in 2050. So it's from an African perspective to say, if you're contributing so much to the creative world, how do you build onto that? How do you leverage that? And how do you use that to tell the story of Africa as a creative continent and the different countries leading in creativity in different areas?
Estonia is investing also, creating slots about Estonia and bringing especially the nature in the foreground and everything. And I think it is increasing, but it's again subject to budget. But what they have done really, really great in recent years, also finding special areas, what is really unique about Estonia. So the Smoke Sauna Sisterhood movie that came out a few years ago and got really the highest prizes Estonia ever got. That was really a message as well, that even Estonians were surprised that, okay, I didn't know that we go to smoke sauna that way. So it was kind of a...
Smoking what?
Smoke sauna.
Okay. Oh.
So apparently the smoked meat lasts longer, but that was also one of these moments where we could see that actually was not planned marketing, but when it happens and the story comes out, and that was really touching story, and that goes to the word. For some, it might be even unpleasant because it's kind of like too intimate. You see a lot of naked skin. It's not like people are used to it, but that is what the Nordics is. You go to sauna, you have rituals, and when that comes through a very natural story, then suddenly you also bring people closer. And I think you need a combination of really film industry, producing the stories of the country and nation and culture, and then also targeted marketing campaigns, trying also to bring that up for this really unique. Try to beat now with the smoke sauna.
I love the sauna. I think indeed it's like Davos. Davos, you have too many clothes. Sauna, you have too little clothes. When you're naked, overdressed, it allows people to get more frank to each other because we all look ridiculous with the shoes we have, and it helps opening doors, and you're more frank. It's the same when you have. I was in Senegal visiting the hospital. Everybody was sweating up, so then you have to be sincere. Because you don't look good anyway, so at least address the real topics. And I think the climate change things, but more seriously on the culture field. First of all, there's a danger in it. So culture is a key asset in the field of nation branding. The big risk is if governments are overusing culture, because the independence of culture of artists is there. So giving them visibility is one thing. Ordering people to be creative or overusing it can have downsides. Kind of a Barbra Streisand effect. And you have to accept that if you want the real artist to be there, you have to give them freedom. And sometimes, even me in Switzerland, I'm not in a position to give the full freedom to some artists, because if you do that and they make a massive artwork criticizing Swiss banks and democracy and so on, it will be certainly great. I might lose my job, but on top of me, it might not have the positive effect we would expect. So working with culture is great. Film location, the best thing for us is that many movies that are supposed to be shot in Switzerland are actually shot in Austria because it's less expensive, but they still pretty to be in Switzerland. So the Austrians are supportive the cost of the Swiss brand activities. Thanks for them. Dankeschön.
I'm going to tell them.
Right? They know it, but at least it makes money. It's also return on culture is also a big return of investment for the GDP. So, and the last thing for us is, interestingly, the biggest effect, the biggest visibility we had in the field of culture last year, so in 24, was we won finally back after 1986 the Eurosong contest. Céline Dion, by the way, at the time, has been singing for Switzerland. I don't know why the hell a Canadian artist has been singing for us, but whatever, we won. And this year we won. It was interesting because it was a non-binary artist from Switzerland. Big surprise for the world that you had people under 40 years old in Switzerland, that they were non-binary and they were open-minded. Just like when you look at the perception we have, this is not how Switzerland is perceived. So it was fascinating. Suddenly it was a massive exposure for the Swiss branding. It was a 50-50 thing. The conservative, some countries in Europe might be conservative. They're like, oh, come on, one more woke artist, non-binary things on stage. Has Switzerland lost everything? And the other part were saying, it's great to see that. It was exactly the same in Switzerland. Some people said, Nemo is not Swiss. And some people say, finally, we have someone like us on stage. So in the perception, even internally, was a challenge. It has been massive. Eurosong contest coming to Switzerland this year as the winner takes it all. And they're coming here. It's going to be how culture and show business will have an impact. But there's always two sides. So you have, I won't mention the countries here, but you can imagine the Nordics, most people were very happy. Sweden found great that in Switzerland we had that. And other countries were like, Eurosong should be cancelled. So, yes, it has an impact, not always the one you expect, and you have to live with it.
So any PR is good PR, I suppose, or as long as you manage it and as long as you make the most out of it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for this fascinating panel discussion. I'm powered up for the rest of the week. I hope you all are. Thank you so much to the Polish Business Hub for hosting us, to Eastrise for inviting us and bringing us all together. And thank you to our panelists for sharing their knowledge and experience with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.